I want to talk to you about something that's countercultural. And if we're going to understand what our true destination of North is, we've got to talk about it. Because our world's culture has this phrase out there that it's all about me. Your questions are going to change from, did you have a good Thanksgiving, to what you getting for Christmas? And afterwards, it's going to be, what did I get or didn't get? It's going to value whether Christmas was good. And it's fascinating how that whole mind thought influences other things that are even of a more critical nature. And if we're going to grow into maturity, we have got to grasp this one. And every psychological system has this in it. They talk about how are you growing as your psyche and your person, and everyone near the top has this one thing. And that is when I give to something else or I reproduce. Now, we're not talking about having more kids. Okay? But we are talking about turning from self-centered people to people who are generous and outgoing. And that's a tough one. Because everything in our culture screams that we need more. Ted Turner once said in an address to Emerson College, it's all relative. I sit down and say, I've got $10 billion. I can't even imagine how much that is. I'm more familiar with the zero. But then I look over and I see Bill Gates with $100 billion. And I feel like I'm a complete failure in life. So billions won't make you happy if you are worried that someone's got more than you. So don't let yourself get caught in the trap of measuring your success by how much material success you have or somebody else. This issue goes beyond success. We take our standard of living for granted and feel entitled to it. And yet, 1.3 billion people live on less than $1 a day. I just want to put a disclaimer in here for a moment. I'm not asking you for money. Okay? Relax. We've already taken the offering. Okay? I'm not here to produce a guilt trip that you have money. You see, I am here to challenge our thought process about it. I am here to remind us that if we've got it under illegal gain or by taking advantage of people, then there's a problem with it. But if we've earned it, saved it, scrutinized it, been frugal, there's not a problem with that. But if that's what creates our life and our success, then there's a problem. I'm also here to say that God makes a claim on our money. After all, He gave it to us. I'm also to say that God doesn't judge people because they have or have not have it. Everything was created by God for good, including money. Let's talk about a couple of things with it. Paul writes to his young understudy, his young disciple, his person he loved so much he called a son, this young pastor who was struggling in ministry, and he said, teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. It's foolish to trust in money. Most of my life, I could not convince people of the words of Jesus when He said, don't lay up treasure in this world where moth and rust can destroy. You know why? Because they were making 14 to 18% on their CDs. You remember those days? Do you also remember that we had a 14% inflation rate, and if you wanted to borrow money, it was 18 to 21%? But we lived in a myth that we were making a lot of money on our investments. But since the housing crash in the early 2000s and the Ponzi schemes and some of the bank defraudings, we have seen how quickly that money has gained wings and flown away, haven't we? I know of people personally that had to quit being retired and go back to work because they lost so much of their investments. And so the moth got in and ate. In the Great Depression, when the market crashed so hard, suicide rate was incredible because our trust was in our money. Isn't it interesting that on our coins it says, "In God we trust," but in our hearts it says, "It's mine"? Their trust should be in God, who gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Funny, I'm preaching on this 4 days after Thanksgiving and 3 days after Good Friday. I saw a really cute cartoon this week that's had a guy saying, "Don't tell me you can't get up in time for church when you made it to Walmart at 6 a.m. on Black Friday." My wife thought I should go to Walmart early Friday morning to save $5 on a coffee pot. I reminded her that my life was worth more than that. However, I did have to go to Verizon because her phone died. It was a fascinating journey on Black Friday. It was right into the counter, an overeager salesman who was telling me of the benefits of what I was going to save on Black Friday, and we were getting it all clear and straight. And while we were there, he says, "Let me go do some figuring. Well, by the way, we have this iPad on sale today. If you buy that phone, you can get it for $100, which is an incredible price for an iPad, by the way. Okay, it's the little one." So I said, "Yeah, we need another one. Her Kindle's starting to go." And so I came home with a phone and an iPad, but while I was there and they were doing the figuring, he says, "Come here a minute. This entire table is 50% off, including the drone." I said, "What is a phone store doing with a drone?" "Well, you can control it from your new iPad." Be careful, Bernie. That thing may die in your yard. Well, then there was headsets there, and there was wireless speakers, and all sorts of stuff. And I had to stand there while he conveniently went and figured the bill. And he came back and said, "What else do you want?" I said, "You've already got enough money out of me today." And I walked out regretting the fact that I suckered into an iPad until that night, this one fell down in the couch and broke. Cut my finger on it, actually. Not bad, but so Joyce isn't getting her Kindle replaced. It flees quickly, doesn't it? How many times have we just looked at our check and started paying bills, and where did this go? It's gone. Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Be wise enough to know when to quit. In the blink of an eye, wealth disappears, for it will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. Boy, do you feel that every day you pay bills? Where did it go? It was there. Where did it go? Well, I know. I can tell you now. It flew away. I want to talk to us. Just two truths here I want to remind you this morning, okay? And the first one is that God gives us money to make a difference. To make a difference. Paul writes to Timothy and he says, they should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. That challenges my heart. Because quite frankly, there's times when I'm tired and cranky and I don't want to look for an opportunity to help somebody. First truth we really need to understand is that whatever God has blessed you with financially is so that you can make a difference, not just a living. We got to quit singing that song. I owe, it's off to work I go. Christ followers are to develop a lifestyle of good works, primarily caring and compassion. If we're really to get to the point of maturity in Christ, we got to get to that top level of even our psychic that says, I can give to somebody else. Having a 2.5-year-old in the house has been a delight. You ever notice one thing about a 2-year-old? It's mine. I cooked 10 hot dogs. They were his. Had to sneak one off the plate when he wasn't looking. Ever go to McDonald's with him and try to take a French fry? Come on, who bought them? And have you ever heard of McDonald's running out of French fries? I've been to coffee shops where they've run out of coffee, but I've never been to McDonald's when they ran out of French fries. We need to be generous and willing to share. Instead, we pull our fries back and say, mine! Instead of going to the Father and say, I need more so I can give it away. And then he says, okay, I'll give you more. What are you going to do with it? Well, Apostle Paul wrote to a church in Acts 20, and he says, in everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words of Jesus when he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. I can still remember as a small child when my mother drilled that into my head. I never believed her till I was about 40 years old. You know why? I always wanted more. And then I ended up in a situation, instead of being the pastor to hurting people and caring for them, instead of walking into a hospital room and loving somebody and helping them find some peace and strength, people were walking in and doing that for me. I didn't like that side of the bed. I have a hard time when someone comes along and says, hey, let me do that for you. No, I'm the one that wants to give. I could do this. I don't need anybody's help. Oh, but let me help you. There's a whole thing in our lives that it's more blessed to give than to receive. I still struggle because it was drilled into me that gentlemen should open the door for ladies when they go through. I have a hard time letting a hostess or somebody else open the door because I want to give, but it's more blessed to give than to receive. Paul writes to the Corinthians, wonderful, fascinating chapter, and he says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Each man should give. And he goes on and says, remember this, a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and you don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully, and God will generously provide all you need. Then you will always have everything you need and plenty left over to share with others. Giving should be proportional. Notice that? It should be proportional. With what we have given, we should give. Giving should not be just a percentage. I know where we get that. I'm a big fan of it. I fully understand that the Old Testament talked about tithing. It talked about, and we in America had reduced it to 10%. A true tithe in the Old Testament was more like about 26%. So you're getting a discount. But the problem with understanding that is, and even Malachi wrote and said, listen, you wonder why you're robbing God? It's because you're not giving him 10%. And if you would only test me in this, God says, I will open up my doors and pour out a blessing upon you. Someone about 3 weeks ago took me really serious on this, and they sent me a text and said, my life is so messed up right now, I'm going to give God more money and hope that he opens up the heavens and pours out a blessing on me. I thought, okay. Got a text this week. Wow, can't begin to tell you the change in my life. The blessings that God has poured out. I really think we need to understand that part of our growing in maturity is that we reach different stages and ages in our life where we need to forget the percentage thing, because it's really easy for me to look back and say, hey, I gave my 10%. A couple of years ago, I really sat down and did the numbers. Joyce and I probably give about 20%. It doesn't come all to the church because we believe God has laid other things on our hearts. We've backed that off in the last year or so. I don't say that to brag. I just tell you that I seem to be doing well. Generous giving is purposeful. We need to think about it. If you don't think about paying your bills and you just do it randomly and whenever you want to, guess what happens? You miss one. I have a budget sheet. And there's times in my compulsiveness that I think I know it and I don't do it, and then I get these notes. You missed a payment, Mr. Linhart. We'll charge you for that. Giving ought to be purposeful. Not only purposeful about how we do it and how we write our checks and how we do it. I learned this from my father without him ever saying a word to me about it. You remember years ago you used to get checks, paper checks, and they would come in this little box about this big and about this thick. Well, my dad had a desk in the dining room, and I could remember from time to time seeing him when he got his paycheck coming home with green stuff called cash, and opening up that drawer and in the center slot pulling out that box and putting some money in it. I don't know how much it was. It was several bills. And I remember him on Sunday mornings sitting down at that desk and pulling that thing out, taking that green stuff out and stuffing it in an envelope. My dad was a factory worker, foreman, made a whole $3.50 an hour at the top. I was shocked after they passed away and realized how much they had saved and how much God had blessed them. Even when my dad, our mother spent 100 days in a hospital before she passed away. I remember standing there with my dad one day, and he looked at me and he says, time we get done with this, there's going to be nothing left for you kids. I says, Dad, you always told me you were saving for a rainy day. He says, yeah, but wasn't expecting a cloudburst. See, we live with a thing called greed in our hearts. Greed is one of those diseases you never cure. It can be treated, but you can never seem to get rid of it. The greatest treatment for it is generosity. Rich Mullen learned a way to deal with it. Rich Mullin was a songwriter and singer in the late 80s, early 90s. He wrote an incredible song that we sing, but it wasn't the one we sang this morning. It was called My God's an Awesome God. It's a little different than this one. We've sung it before. But he was an incredible contemporary singer. But somehow he was afraid of the affluence that he was about to inherit as he began this ministry for Christ. And it's very, very productive. And so he decided that to stay away from that, he was going to create a board of directors for his ministry who would pay him a salary that was similar to the average salary of somebody in the community. And that is what he was going to live on. And he was to know nothing about the royalties from records, the income from concerts, and the royalties from the music that he created. And he lived that way until he was tragically killed in an airplane crash in 1997. Rick Warren, after he wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, shared at a pastor's conference a years ago, a long time ago, when he wrote that book, Purpose-Driven Life, and made millions on it. He said, I had to deal with two new stewardship issues in my life. Number one, the spirit of influence, the stewardship of influence, because governors, presidents, world leaders were all calling him to come and speak. And his world of influence expanded in magnitude. And then he said, I had to learn to live in the stewardship of affluence. And he says, what we chose to do was we gave every dime back to the church that they paid us over our years. I refused to take a salary anymore. We still drive our Fords. We still live in the same house. We have more to give away. He used the majority of the royalties of that book to create a foreign mission society named Peace Something to go help hungry children around the world. Secondly, we need to understand about making a permanent dividend. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, that they may experience true life. See, wise stewardship accumulates eternal benefits. Giving is not about losing, it's about laying up. My dad, as I told you, was planning for a rainy day. We've lost that in our society. Most of us struggle from paycheck to paycheck. We've not learned how to begin to save for a rainy day. We've not thought about tomorrow. We want to get through today. Now we're going to talk about the fact that if we really want to kill the giant of greed in our lives and we want to be generous, we got to realize that it's not about this life. It's about that life to come. There's lots of jokes about dying and going to heaven and types of houses you're going to live in or not live in, and we're not going to go into any of them. All I want to say is there seems to be something about sending ahead for eternity. This church has existed for 18 years because of the generosity of people. We don't do a lot of fundraisers. Benevolence committee, because it's not about getting money for them, it's about getting money for others. We trust God to supply our needs. It's been an incredible journey. And some of you have invested in it that has changed lives. And when you get to heaven, you're going to be rewarded eternally for that. And you're not even going to have a clue that you did it. For those of you who give to that top secret of extending 20,000 churches from China back to Jerusalem, you're not going to have a clue. Someone's going to come up someday and say, hey, you gave, and I'm one of those people that came to know Jesus through it. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, and some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with sorrows. We have a lot of criminals in prison. I write to one of them who was charged with embezzlement. But you know what? We have a lot of other people who are walking around so deep in debt that it pierces their hearts. They don't answer their phones for fear it's a creditor. They have to look at families and say, we don't have enough food to put on the table. It pierces their heart. We have other people who can't communicate at home because they can't talk about money. It pierces their marriage. All because we love something we shouldn't love. Boy, aren't you glad you came to church today? I'm not on a guilt trip today. I'm not on a squeeze trip. I want to see you become generous people consistently all the time. How do we know that? How do we check our generosity? Well, check your heart by checking your checkbook. You know what that means? What have I spent my money on? Is where my heart is. Jesus says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. And where your heart is, that's where your treasure goes. And then he says you can't serve both of them. You can't serve God and mammon. It's a dividing point. Check your checkbook. It'll tell you. Secondly, develop a plan for giving. I know one person who really is a very generous person, has a plan for giving. They sit down together as a couple and they plot out what they're going to give to for the following year, and they have some adjustments in it. In fact, when we started our roofing project, they said you asked at the right time, because we had this money that we were thinking about putting here, and we're going to divert it here. You have a plan for giving? You should. Because that way you're not wishy-washy. I have a plan for giving that I sense God wants me to give to, and that's why I can throw a lot of letters in the mailbox, in the trash can right away. Or I shred them because I don't want my address out. Shred them. Because I haven't sensed God's heart telling me that needs to be in your plan. I can't give to everything. We give to several things, but you know what? It's from the heart. It's what I really want to invest in because I think it's worthwhile. Develop a plan for giving. Turn your daily living into a time to look to give. You know, I have opportunities every day to give to somebody. It's not necessarily financial. I have so much fun in elevators. I know most of you get on an elevator and you become very stoic and frigid. I have fun on elevators. If we go to Florida Hospital, I tell them I'm going to the 4th floor. They look at me. They start to, there's no 4 there. There was a young kid on there, and I says, hey, man, you're great. And I asked him about the 12th floor or something, and I just start joking with him. And you know what? I lighten their day because most people in that elevator are either there working in a very tough caregiving profession, or they're there visiting somebody with a heartache that you have no idea. I've ended up praying with people. I've ended up getting sad faces to smile. I've ended up walking clear out to the parking lot, engaged in conversations with people because I chose to give. Oh yeah, I've had some that I couldn't walk away from fast enough. I'll just be honest with you, okay? They bring their umbilical cord and want to plug it in and suck all my emotional energy out. But listen, we almost have another epidemic in our society, is that people want to violate the law to give you the right of way when you don't have the right of way. You're really nervous when I'm at a four-way stop and I was there last and they're going, come on. And I say, as soon as I go and they hit me, guess who's at fault? So we got to be cautious about it. But we need to look for opportunities to care. I was standing in line at the donut shop the coffee shop. I don't go to donut shops. I go to coffee shops. And they were swamped. And there was a family beside me with a little 4 or 5-year-old. And it was the mother of one of the gals who worked. And she was on their way to have the whole front end of her mouth extracted because the teeth had died, and she's 5 years old. And this girl normally works. And she looked at the boss and said, do you want me to help? And the boss said, yeah. So she jumps behind. She waits on everybody. And I find this story out by talking to Grandma. And I reached in my pocket and I said, I want to tip her and her alone. I don't want it to be a shared tip. And I've had several conversations later about dealing with the struggles of a 6-year-old who's not like every other kid. Hey, if you struggle with this, you need to enroll in our Good Sense course. It's coming up in February. It just really helps you skin down. Oh, it's a commercial time. We haven't next year. And it really helps us understand getting our whole mindset switched around to what is God's view of our hearts and our giving and our finances. Merry Christmas. I hope this Christmas season, from your heart, you can sense God leading you to be generous in the right way. Wherever that may be. To seek Him and to serve Him. And watch what He does as you become generous. In fact, in that passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, it talks about that cheerful giver. That word there is hilarious. Be a hilarious giver. We ought to find ways to be hilarious givers. At Betty's funeral service, Kathy and Darren sang "People Need the Lord." It reminded me of another song the Beatles used to sing. See the lonely people? See them everywhere? Faces, eyes. People need the Lord. God can use your spirit of generosity to care for them. In the first service, I shared a Christmas verse that most people don't consider a Christmas verse. You know it as John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave. In fact, we celebrate communion because God so loved you that He gave. This cracker, this juice,